It's just been announced from Downing Street that Mrs. Thatcher is to resign as Prime Minister. Labour have swept to power in the election. They're heading for their biggest ever majority of 100... Indian police are holding a pigeon under armed guard because they suspect it's been on a spying mission for Pakistan.
It was a distinctive voice, warm and resonant, the voice of benign authority with just a hint of humour.
Years ago, I was asked to record some announcements in case of nuclear attack.
This is the BBC. We are interrupting our programmes to bring you a special news flash. The Ministry of Defence... It was totally secret, and I'm not sure I'm supposed to be speaking about it to this day, but certainly at that time, no, it was hush-hush.
Did you talk about it to your wife?
No.
Nobody at all in your family?
No, I didn't talk about it to any colleagues or any family, no.
Was it something that gave you a sense of pride to be selected?
I never thought of it like that. I'd just, to be the last voice people heard, no, that didn't occur to me. And make your way to the centre of the house, taking a portable battery-operated radio with you, and stay tuned to this frequency.
Peter Donaldson got his first job as an announcer with the Forces radio station, BFBS.
Peter Donaldson.
In 1970, he joined Radio 2, but soon switched to Radio 4.
And now, just before our next programme, a repeat of the motorway warning for drivers southbound on the M1 in Hertfordshire. The Hertfordshire police say that due to a series of multiple accidents on the southbound carriageway of the M1 near Junction 6, the A405 for Watford, the southbound carriageway is seriously restricted, and police ask all southbound drivers to leave the motorway by the M10, so that the police and other services can deal with the accidents.
Radio 2, 1500, 247 and VHF.
Roundabout, roundabout, you'll never recall what you found about when you hear the music we have for you. Yes, we do.
That's the sound that'll introduce the programme, in which there'll be lots of good music and lots of information too, whether you're at home, a housewife, or possibly a pensioner, and there'll be something for the children as well. There'll be interviews with people of interest in the area, ranging from politicians to pop stars. And later in the show, as people start heading home from work, we'll keep you in touch with the traffic situation, the sports scene, and any other matters that might be of interest to you. That's what Roundabout is all about. 4 till 6, Monday to Friday.
In 1983, he became the station's chief announcer, despite a sometimes chippy relationship with BBC management. He could be sombre when required, but relished life's absurdities as well.
BBC News at 7 o'clock. The Falkland Islands crisis has claimed a number of political casualties. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Carrington, has resigned, and so have his deputy, Mr. Humphrey Atkins, and a Foreign Office Minister of State, Mr. Richard Luce.
BBC News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, this is Peter Donaldson. All the general election results are now in. The Conservatives have a House of Commons majority of 102. The last result came from Southdown, where Mr. Enoch Powell has lost his seat. Mrs. Margaret Thatcher says her priorities are now housing and education. Some changes in the cabinet are expected over the weekend. Mr. Kinnock says Labour failed to win because they'd had a long way to come from their defeat of 4 years ago. For the Alliance, Dr. Owen and Mr. Steele have tackled the question of a full merger. We present the news quiz, and here's the chairman, Barry Took.
We start with a sign seen on Ward Street, Guildford, read by Peter Donaldson.
Due to roadworks, these toilets are not operational. Please use the pavement on the other side.
Here's a cutting from the Evening Standard, read by Peter Donaldson.
A lucky motorist escaped unharmed when an 18-ton lorry fell on his car from a bridge. One passerby did suffer slight injuries, although this was due to running into a wall as he fled the accident.
We launched round 3 with this small ad in the Yorkshire Post.
Successful businessman, widower, aged 44, usual trappings, non-smoker with varied interests, seeks affectionate, understanding female to shave the enjoyable things of life.
We start with an item from a local church news sheet, read by Peter Donaldson.
The sermon for this morning, Jesus walks on water. The sermon for tonight, searching for Jesus. In Florence Cray, the parts were played as follows. Jeeves, Michael Horden; Bertie Wooster, Richard Bryars; Florence Cray, Bronwyn Williams; Stilton Cheesewright, Michael Kilgareth; The Salesman, Bruce Bennett. Joy in the Morning by P.G. Woodhouse was adapted for radio by Chris Miller. The programme was produced by Simon Brett. This is BBC Two with Radio 4, Arena Radio Night, with Peter Cook as the body and soul of television, Josie Lawrence as the spirit of radio, and me, Peter Donaldson, as the announcer. The more perceptive amongst you might have noticed that if you're listening only to the radio, you can't hear what the television's saying to it, and vice versa. This is quite deliberate. In fact, it's a policy decision which will apply for the whole evening.
And with me now in the studio is Peter Donaldson, one of the more senior announcers of the present day. Well, while we're researching this programme, we've found lots and lots of letters, people complaining about pronunciation. Do you find problems with that?
They're still coming in and have been for as long as I've been an announcer, from the earliest, possibly, controversy versus controversy. It's old people like me who say controversy, and the young people who now say controversy, and that's winning, to kilometre and kilometre. And I know the rules about that, but I still say kilometre, even though I know I should say kilometre.
Do you find problems with names? I mean, names of politicians, for instance.
Oh, well,
foreign leaders.
Wasn't that the earliest one, of course, was Sir Haji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, who was first Federal Prime Minister of Nigeria, but no sooner had the announcer got his tongue around that word than he was shot dead. And there's been some Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. But my favourite was a far simpler one than that. On the religious programme, the Sunday programme on Radio 4, I came across this name, Canaan Banana. And I was told, no, you can't possibly say banana. So I had to say Canaan Banana. And now, as we all know, it is Canaan Banana.
Of all the many letters you have received, I know you've received a lot of mail over the years.
A lot usually to do with pronunciation, but this one has nothing to do with pronunciation, and it is my all-time favourite because of its simplicity. Dear Sir or Madam, your news bulletin at 6 p.m. on Radio 4 is usually immediately preceded by the sound of a clock striking 6. But yesterday, the 9th of March, there was no sound of a clock, only 6 pips. I'm not complaining, I'm not asking why, but I want you to know that somebody did actually notice it.
BBC News. This is Peter Donaldson. Congressional leaders are inching closer to a deal on averting big spending cuts and tax rises. But there won't be a vote in the House of Representatives tonight, so technically America will go over its fiscal cliff. A leading group of federalists has said Britain should be an associate member of the EU, losing its MEPs, commissioner, and power. 70 prominent academics in China have warned of violent revolution unless political reforms are accelerated. And 2 men have been arrested in connection with a bomb planted on a police officer's car in East Belfast. BBC News.
The broadcaster and former Radio 4 newsreader Peter Donaldson has died at the age of 70. He'd been suffering from cancer.
And the amazing thing about Peter is he reads so quickly, and yet you're not aware of it. And every single word is so audible and precise and clean and crisp, and every stress is in the right place, and he makes complete sense.
I think he had quite an enigmatic style. It was, to my ears, slightly detached, but nevertheless showed a terrific warmth and humanity. But I think the enigmatic style masks something else which we may come on to a bit later on.
There was this morning on the Today programme when there was some debate about the correct pronunciation of Glasgow, and John had been at an event in Glasgow a couple of weeks earlier and had been told emphatically it should be pronounced Glasgow, so I told him I would look into it. And the BBC's own advice is that it is Glasgow. But I thought, I know you'll know. Peter, so I phoned Peter, and Peter said, well, I've always said Glasgow. The book says Glasgow, but then the book's very old, and I'm very old.
He always got the pronunciations right, and he had a wonderful way of telling all of us if we got it wrong.
Peter would ring you from the Downs and say, "Oh, Sleaty, just blowing the cobwebs away on the Downs," and then he'd tell you what it was he'd heard and say, "Oh, by the way, small thing, it's Murrayfirth, not Moray. Tiny thing, tiny."
One of the early bits of feedback he gave me, which was I was on duty in Con and we got into the 4 o'clock news. Phone rang and it was, "Greetings, CA, PD here. Now just tell me," he said, "what did you not just do?" And then he didn't need to say any more. He just paused and I paused and I thought, that's it, it's the pause. I forgot the pause. And Peter never lost sight of the art of Radio 4, which is all about pacing and pausing.
16 young children and a teacher were shot dead when a lone gunman burst into a primary school at Dunblane in central Scotland and opened fire. The murderer, who was armed with 4 handguns, then killed himself. All the children were under 6 years old.
He had this marvellous phrase, which if you had a very moving drama or a poetry programme or just any documentary that really made you think at the end of it, he would say, leave a pause until it hurts. Because when you're sitting there in continuity and the silence, it's your enemy, silence, but it isn't actually, it's your great friend, and you need to learn how to use it. And Peter taught me, and I think all of us around this table, how to use it and the power it had.
I have a rendezvous with death at some disputed barricade. When spring comes back with rustling shade and apple blossoms fill the air, I have a rendezvous with death when spring brings back blue days and fair. It may be he shall take my hand and lead me into his dark land and close my eyes and quench my breath. It may be I shall pass him still. I have a rendezvous with death on some scarred slope of battered hill when spring comes round again this year and the first meadow flowers appear. God knows, 'twere better to be deep-pillowed in silk and scented down, where love throbs out in blissful sleep, pulse nigh to pulse and breath to breath, where hushed awakenings are dear. But I've a rendezvous with death at midnight in some flaming town, when spring trips north again this year, and I to my pledged word am true. I shall not fail that rendezvous.